class first. What I'll do, I'll right click over here and create a new class and name it as test base. So this will be a base class for all our test cases. This will act as a super class, as a parent class for all our test cases, right? And all the initializations will be done inside this class. So what all things will be initializing? We'll be initializing our web driver. We'll be initializing properties, right? We'll be initializing logs. We'll be initializing our extent reports, right? We'll be initializing the DB part. We'll be initializing the Excel reading part, right? And what all things we have. So we can implement the mailing part over here as well, right? So these are the things that we will require before we get started with our test cases. We want that all these things should be initialized initially, right? So in order to initialize them, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna create some methods over here. I'll create the very first method and name it as a setup method. So one method setup and one method tear down. Right. So these are like a standard approach that is followed in any framework where we have a setup method in which we initialize everything. In tear down method, we quit everything, we close everything, right? So now I want that this method should be called before we call any test case, right? Any test case, not in a particular class, in a particular suite, right? In a suite we may have 100 classes, right? And we have in which we have different test cases. So before we call any of those classes, any of those test cases, this setup method should be executed. So what I'll do, I'll add an annotation on top of it and name it as @before suite. And this we will be importing through testng, right? This will be one of the testng annotation. I'll add the testng library and click on import from testng, right? Similarly, after executing all of your test cases, you want to quit things, you want to terminate the sessions, right? So all the code will gonna come inside tear down method. So this will be after suite. So after suite will be executed after we execute all our test cases, right? So we'll get started with the basic initialization of WebDriver first. So what we're gonna do, I'll gonna call WebDriver over here and declare it as a null over here at the moment, right? We'll be initializing it later on. I'm just gonna create a reference of this. That's it, right? So reference means like on the runtime, I'll be defining whether this driver should the object of a Chrome driver or whether it gets initialized with the iDriver or Firefox driver, right? So this we need to decide based on the values that we're going to give in our config properties file, right? So let's say in config property file, I'll be mentioning my browser is Chrome or IE or Firefox, whichever browser name I'll give over here, the browser will be launched accordingly, right? Similarly, I'm going to mention the test site URL, right? So we'll be working on some application which will be automating. So what I'm going to do, this is one of the application which you can use for a practice purpose. This is one of the Angular application that I'll be using. This is a banking application, basically a sample banking application where you can easily create 10 to 15 test cases, right? You can automate a lot of things. So what functionality that it contains, you click on bank manager, you need to add customer over here, right? Let me open it up in a separate window. Just give me a moment. So this will be something like you go to bank manager login, click on add customer. Let's say you create the very first customer by giving the name, the postcode, click on add customer, validate whether you get this message, customer added successfully, click on OK, click on open and select the added customer from here, add a currency, click on process, validate this message, then click on customer, validate whether the customer exists over here or not, right? After validating this, go to home and log in with that particular customer, select the customer, log in, and deposit some amount, let's say deposit 1,000, and then withdraw some amount and try to withdraw a greater amount. You're gonna get this message. So validate if this message is received when you try to withdraw amount which is more than the balance, and then try to withdraw less amount and see if the transaction is successful. Validate your transactions and then log out. Right. So these are the things that you can perform, and you'll find many you can implement many locator techniques like CSS, XPath, right? And number of things that you can like while automating this application, you can handle all those things. And once we have designed 8 to 10 test cases and we have implemented all the utilities that we have seen initially, that is all these things, then we're gonna get an idea of how the frameworks will actually gonna work, right? So how these things can be mapped with our test cases and how the entire project will gonna run. So this idea will gonna come with the basic approach that we are following right now. Right. So let's get started with the initialization part. So the very first thing will be looking at how to initialize properties. Right. So properties, as in we have two properties file over here. One is OR properties and other one is config properties, right? So if I take about the example of OR properties, I'll be keeping all my locators over here, right? So if I talk about locators, so let's say this is the application I want to inspect this element. We'll be working on a Chrome browser, right? And now I believe you are already familiar with how to work with Firebug and Firepath if you have Firefox, right? So it's very easy to take locators from there. Right now, in this example, we'll be using the inbuilt tool of Chrome, that is the Inspect Element Developer tool, right? And then we'll be forming up the entire locators with CSS in this example, right? We'll be looking at XPath as well, but in this we'll be working entirely on CSS, and in the next project we're gonna work entirely on XPath, so that you'll get complete hands-on on all different locators, right? So what I'm gonna do, I'll first take the locator of this bank manager login button. I'll click on inspect, and here we have a lot of things in the console. I'm gonna go inside the console and do Control L will clear everything, right? And the locator I can form up with many different techniques, as in if I want to take this class, so I'll say double dollar stands for CSS, within brackets and double quotes I'm gonna mention the class starts from dot, so dot btn, then we have space, again dot btn primary dot btn lg. So we have two buttons over here. It means both of these buttons has got the same class. So I'm going to take the parent of this class, that is a div and this. So it seems both buttons has got the same parent. Let us look over here. So this is the first one, and I believe this is the second one. Right. So in the hierarchy, this comes the first, and this is the second one. So we need this parent basically, right? And both parent has got like their parent as a div, right? So there's one more hierarchy where I can write div over here. So div is a parent of this particular div, right? Now what I need to do, from this div, I need to tell that this div should be the last child in the hierarchy, right? This is the last child in the hierarchy. So what I can do, I'll form up a CSS by saying colon last child, and it will give me this particular button, right? This button. So I'm going to take this CSS and just a second. Sorry, this CSS, not that one. I'll copy this and paste it over here. Say bank manager login button. Right. Now, how to read the property files? So first we'll take a look how we're gonna read the property file. I'll go to my rough package and I'll gonna create a class where I'll be saying test properties. So all the locators I'll be storing in my or.properties. I'll treat it as an object repository, right, where I'll be keeping locators throughout my website. And config, I'll be storing all my configuration things like my with what is my browser, what is the test site URL, right? Any other path that you want to store, you can store it over here, right? So that these values should not be hard coded. If there is any change in the locator or any change in the website URL, you can directly go to these files and you can update it over here, right? Now, what I'm gonna do, I'll go to test properties and I'll add a main method over here. Right, and we'll see how to read the properties file. In order to read the property files, the very first thing you need to add a class that is called as properties. This class is inbuilt inside the Java library itself. So we're going to create an object of this class by saying properties or equal to new properties. Right, first let's create it for config. So config is just a name. I'm just giving it a name. Properties config equal to new properties. That's it. Right, and I'll import it. Now, whichever file that you want to read the data from this file. So just press Alt Enter and take the path of this file. And this file we need to give it to the object of file input stream. So we're going to create another object of a class called as file input stream. See, this properties is from Java util, right? So file input stream FIS equal to new file input stream, like this. And once I import this file input stream, this is again a Java library, and there's a constructor that accepts the path of your file. So path of the file, we're gonna give it like this with double backslash. Right, like this. Now when we are specifically talking about the path, now first we are getting some error over here. Error is that it's asking me to add the exception. I'll click on add throws declaration and it will gonna add the exception, file not found exception, right? So whenever we are adding path, we need to make sure that the path should be generic, so that if I move this project to any other location, I need not to change the path. This path is right now from my machine, right? So what I can do, if you take a look over here, this is up till the data driven framework. I can write something system dot get property and give the key as user.dir, and I'm gonna print this path. I'm gonna print this thing. Let's see what it prints. If I run this, see, it prints the current path up till the data driven framework, up till your project path, right? So this much thing you can get it by using this statement, right? Means over here up till data driven framework, you can achieve it by concatenating this thing, right? So that if the project moves to any other location, this much path remains the same, right? Only the initial path gets changed. And similarly, once we have loaded the file, we need to call a method from the properties, that is conf.load, and it will accept your FIS and add this exception. Right. So the configuration file is loaded. Now we're gonna say we are gonna say config. Config is the reference. Config.get property, and we're gonna mention browser over here. And let's print this and see what it prints. So I'll run this. Say it printed Chrome. Right. In the same way, I can take another reference of this, and let's say I'll add OR over here. Right. And then we need one more file input stream. So I'll say FIS for OR properties. Right. And I'll say OR dot load FIS. So when I again print this with the OR reference and say OR.get property, and this is bank manager login button, and if I run this, it will gonna print the CSS of the element. Right. So what I can do on the runtime, I can say driver dot find element. When I'll be using WebDriver, I'll say driver dot find element by dot CSS selector, right? And I'll give the CSS selector from or dot get property, and I'll give the property as bank manager login button, and then I'll say dot click. This is how I should be writing it. Right. Similarly, browser, I'll be choosing it based on the condition. So how are we going to implement it? Very first thing, I'm going to copy this thing from here and go to my test base and declare it over here. Right. We're going to say public static, and we'll do this thing as a public static. Right. And then we need a file input stream as well. So I'll say public static file input stream FIS. Right. And we're gonna create an object of file input stream later on, where we'll be reading this file. Right. So what I'll do inside setup, I'll say if driver equal to null. Right now the driver is null. So when the driver is null, it should go inside and say FIS, it should first load the property file. So how we have loaded the property files, I'm just going to copy these two statements from here and paste it over here. So first we're going to load the config property, then the OR properties. So either add throws declaration or surround it with try catch block. So this is how we can surround it with try catch block. Right, and both the property files are loaded. So over here, just add this thing. That's it. Right. We are getting some errors. Let's see, where are the errors? FIS. OR dot load FIS. So FIS is basically this file input stream. We have already declared it over here. So we'll take the global file input stream. Right.